Good morning. We are on page 412 in the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, which is the foundational or source text of the end of Hemshech Hayim Beis. So we'll continue, we'll sum up what we learned, and then we shall continue. Okay. Well, first of all, let's mention the dedication. The dedication of this class is in honor of Ariel ben Avraham, right? Aroni Zachrenu Livrocha, Shem Yimkam Domai. We're still within the Shleishim, 30 days of his tragic murder. So our learning is in his honor. And his family may all be strong, may Jews everywhere be strong and protected. And we do our part in the spiritual war by learning Torah, learning Chassidus. So we're in the middle of the discussion of Torah Eir, but namely now we're talking about in Torah itself, Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebal Peh. That there are two levels in this Eir, called it Eir Yashar, direct light, that goes Mamay Lamata, from top down, meaning from the divine to us. And Torah Shebal Peh is a light that also is part of Torah, but it's generated from below, meaning our study of Torah, Bal Peh, like he said, B'dibur, Chochmet Tata, where Torah Shebiksav is Chochmet Lo, Chochmet Tata, because it's the involvement of those that learn Torah, starting from Moshe Rabbeinu and Yeshua and the Sanhedrin and everyone ever learning Torah, then through the Shas, through the Tanoim, Amoraim, till this very day. So even though we also read and study Torah Shebiksav, but Torah Shebiksav was written exactly these words, the letters exactly precise. God gave us this Torah in writing. Torah Shebal Peh is part of the development of the oral interpretation, which also was given at Sinai, and the methodology and the different arguments back and forth. But it was given to us to ultimately come to resolve the halacha. You don't paskin halacha in heaven. From heaven, we receive Torah Shebiksav, we receive the Torah, and we receive all the details. But it's Torah Shebal Peh below, like he said, the Birur Hadvarim, the clarity that's achieved through hearing different arguments, hearing Reuven saying this, Shimon saying that. Is it pure? Is it impure? Coming into this world and clarifying that and coming to an understanding what God wants. What is kosher, what is not kosher, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, becoming Pesach. How many halachas in Pesach? That's all part of Torah Shebal Peh. That is the Ir Chayzer. And he's explaining that has a depth, a power that even the written Torah does not have. And what was the explanation? Because the written Torah, he said, number one, it doesn't reach the Etzem, reading from the bottom of page 411. It doesn't reach Mahus Va'atzmus, he said. So it does illuminate the darkness of the Tzimtzum, because Torah is pre-Tzimtzum Eir. That's not diluted and not affected at all, like we learned Eir Atzmi. But what's really fundamentally happening here? It's revealing that which was there. It's just revealing it that even though there was a Tzimtzum, the Torah is not affected by the Tzimtzum. And he says there's no Kiddush in this at all. Because the Torah just retains its Kedusha, its clarity. It didn't transform the darkness itself. Torah Shebal Peh, on the other hand, he says, when it comes to, like we find by Matan Torah, that the Torah radiated and illuminated the whole world, and the Torah retains that holy level. And then he brought the raya. I wrote in the group that the Rosh Tevis Shin Beis Ayin Kuf is Shabal Keri, because that's what the Gemara is talking about. Someone that releases a impure fluid, so that's called a Bal Keri. And so Bal Keri, so there the Gemara talks about someone who released it, and he was very careful. He was like being very hesitant in saying Torah. So he was told by the Tana, tells him, his teacher tells him, don't be hesitant, because Torah is not makabel tumah. That's what he says. Shemasha Balkeri muter b'divrei Torah. He's allowed to divrei Torah. There's some things he's not allowed to do until he goes to mikveh and purifies himself. But Torah and not makabel tumah. So what do we see from this? That Torah retains its pure divine nature. So there's no chiddush when the Torah reveals that. That's what it is. There's a chiddush gomer, because you're entering into the domain and the world of darkness, of crass darkness, a world that is klipas nega, where the divine is concealed, and there you're revealing what Hashem wants. Like he says, Torah Shabbat teaches us how to make from a material world, a crass material world that conceals the divine, to make it a keli telekus. In the words of the Maimer here, that the Lachal Maisa, the Lachal Maisa is nikra Birur v'Allah atev menara, that to the point that you are, let's just the exact words, that the whole Torah, Eichu ma lasis memchinis keli le'era leki. How? And the method and the way to make the world into a keli leki, and that comes through the Birur, where you're separating the pselis, the waste. When you talk about klipa, there's a husk, there's a shell, and there's a fruit. So when you take you remove the husk, you remove the shell, you peel the fruit, and you extract the fruit. That's the Birur of Torah Sheba'al Peh, extracting the divine sparks that are embedded and hidden in this material world. So this is a chiddush gomer, because we're not talking about the Torah. The oir itself remains pure. We're talking about the oir is now transforming even the husk itself, even the world that is affected by this. Even the material world is turning into a keli for elikus. That's what Torah Sheba'al Peh does. That's the Birur of Torah Sheba'al Peh, Eitz Hadas. Find that good in everything of Chachmet Tata. In all dimensions of Daimim Tzemeach Chaim Medaber, which is mineral, vegetation, animal, and human, to make it an Eir Eliki. And that's where we stopped. And now we'll continue from there. So, to sum up, Torah is Eir, Torah Eir. In Eir itself, there's two dimensions of Eir. In the Eir of Torah, we already learned earlier, there's an Eir of Torah, there's an Eir that shines after the darkness and pierces darkness. Here we're talking about Torah piercing darkness and transforming the material world, like he says, the klipas nega, into Kedusha, into keli telekus. So let's continue learning around halfway down the page, where the line begins, the line begins, Shivurur mehem, and we'll start from the words, U'kamoisha Nuroyim. And the pages can be found at ayimbeis.com. U'kamoisha Nuroyim b'chol inyan ha'alocha sheb'shas, Mishnah of the Talmud, and like we see, after explaining that the Torah reveals, and the Torah Sheba'al Peh reveals, but also teaches us how to refine and how to separate and how to clarify and find the divine in everything and direct it toward what God wants. He says, like we see in all the halachas, all the halachas, the laws in Shas, the Shishas Dorim of Mishnah and Talmud. So we know the Gemara consists of Talmud, the Shas consists of Mishnah from the Tanoim, which is more brief, and then Gemara, Talmud, that elaborates on it, which is all part of Torah Sheba'al Peh. Shemedabrim, so the Shas of Mishnah and Talmud, what does it talk about? All these halachas, what do they discuss? Rak beproti proti shall call mine bries shenivru be'elam. Their whole discussion is only about one thing, the detail, small detail, every detail and nuance from every part of creation that was created in this world. No, it's addressing every iota of existence, of creation, that we're capable of elevating, or levader, and separating, or cleansing, or clarifying, the good, v'akosher, and the kosher, b'taruvas tevara denega, ta'asiyah shenikra cheshech mamish. So all of Shas is coming to do one thing, to go into every detail of existence, every detail of life, and teach us what and how we can elevate the good and the kosher because on its own, it's all mixed together. Taruvis tevara, it's all mixed together. You live your life, you go to work. So work is klipas nega. You eat a meal, klipas nega, which means there's a taruvis tevara here. It's still neutral. And there's a possibility for it to be used for good, a possibility for it to be used neutrally, or a possibility to be used destructively. So there's a mix. This world is a mix. There's no taruvis tevara in Atzilus, for example. There it's completely godliness. Here there is. Which is like what he calls cheshech mamish. Not the tzimtzum above the cheshech ha'elyon. This is cheshech mamish. So there's a taruvis tevara, noiga of asiyah, in klipas nega, in the, you can say transparent or the radiant noiga. Noiga means to radiate, but it's a klippa. It's just a thin shell where there's a mix, and Torah Sheba'al Peh is coming to take every one of these details of existence and show and teach us what we're able to elevate and extract and direct toward godliness. So it comes, let's say, you learn a Masechta brachas. We'll learn that, we'll mention it soon. Tells you what brachas to make on different foods. So the food itself is neutral. We're talking about well, first of all, the Torah tells us what's kosher, what's not kosher. That's number one. Full of halachas. What's kosher, what's not kosher. Then, in the kosher itself, it tells us how to eat a meal. What blessing do you make on each piece of food? Which really means, in the language of Chassidus, how and what do we draw the Kedusha, the goodness, from that piece of food in this material world? So the Torah Sheba'al Peh is involved in teaching us how to transform the very darkness, like he calls it, of cheshech mamish, the taruvis tevara, and to elevate and clarify and separate the good and the kosher from each part of existence. So it's essentially how to sanctify this world. That's the process. That Torah Sheba'al Peh involved in how to, what he calls elevate and refine. Kamoi, and now he gives examples. He's going to go through all this darim, the shishas darim. There are 6 sections in the entire Torah Sheba'al Peh in Shas. That Shas means shishas darim, 6 orders. Each one has many tractates. What are the 6? So there's 2 orders there. Sometimes man nokat, zroim, moyed, nezikin, noshim, kochim, taris. And sometimes we say a different order. It says that's man nokat. Another is nezem cotton, nezikin, zroim, moyed, then kochim, taris, and the noshim. So it's 2 different orders. Here the Rebbe, Metler Rebbe, is going to go with a certain order. I'm not sure if it's with one or the other, but regardless, he's going to go through all 6 and show how Shas is involved in every part of Demim Semeach Chaim Medaber. That's the next section here. But before I continue, does anyone want to ask anything? So he says, Kamoi, B'chol Seder Zroim. He's starting with Seder Zroim. Seder Zroim is the section called, Zroim means plantings, vegetation. So Zroim deals with all the mitzvahs connected to Truma, Meiser, Peya, Meiser Sheni. All these are part of the laws of what you do, the agricultural laws essentially. The laws applying to a farm or to a field, and how you're supposed to relate to it all. So that's Seder Zroim. So Medaber, what does this say to talk about? And all the different species of vegetation from the earth. Kumay Masechta Peya, like the tractate called Peya. What's Peya? Peya means when the field harvests. So the edge, Peya is like an edge. So whatever is on the edge of the field, you're supposed to leave. In other words, this is part of our obligation that when you harvest a field, if you leave it for the poor. The different dinim, what Peya is used for. So it's a whole Masechta called Peya. It's talking about the agricultural laws regarding leaving Peya. Another Masechta is the Klayim, the laws of Klayim. Klayim is which species you're allowed to graft together and which you're not allowed to graft. Just like we talk about shatnez, that linen and wool are not supposed to mix. The same thing is there's certain vegetation you're not supposed to bring to species. You're not supposed to mix together. It's called Klayim. Is to respect the boundaries of of in that world. So, and another Masechta is called Mai. Mai is yet another mitzvah that was supposed to do with the parts of of the harvest. So there's more. There's Peya, Klayim, Dmai. There's a few others, but regardless, this is all a part of Seder Zerayim. L'chol mineim. So it talks about every tzemeach sheba'adama, talking about all the different species of the ground, the vegetation, the world of tzemeach. L'chol mineim, to all their species. Shekel kol minei bria shebechelik hatzemeach. Sheyitzmach min adama. This encompasses all the different aspects of creation in the world of vegetation. So it talks about them all in Seder Zerayim. Everything that grows from the earth. And what is the Torah Shebal Peh of Masechta Zerayim coming to teach us? So he says, "V'chol ma shedibru chachmei haMishnah." And everything that the sages of the Mishnah said and taught, pratein, in the details, ve'eza din va'alocha, all the details in any particular law or edict or law is the right word, din ha'alocha, zehu b'chinas ha'birur, that's the birur that they're doing. They're addressing the different species, they're addressing things in the world of agriculture and the vegetation, and their teachings and all the details of the halachas, that's the birur, that's the clarification, the clarity, and the separation, and the refinement, shalatev mehen la'leisa l'mayla. The birur, to clarify the good. So let's say in Masechta Peya, it's talking about this is the fruit or the vegetables that you're supposed to, that you gather, and this is what you leave. So it's teaching us how to align that field to what Hashem wants. So that's a birur of the good, of what is good, and what is appropriate, and what is not appropriate. Like the mitzvah of Peya, the mitzvah of leaving Peya, the edge of the field, veleket ani, which is the part that the ani, the poor person, should be able to gather. That there's a halachas, detailed laws that the Chachmei Mishnah, that the sages of the Mishnah specify and discuss in detail. So in the pasuk in Chumash it talks about the mitzvah, but it doesn't tell you all these details. To clarify what exactly are we supposed to do when you own a farm and the harvest comes, what exactly the laws of Hilchos Peya, you have to learn Masechta Peya. V'chein b'trumas hamaisis. And another part of Zerayim is also Trumas Hamaisis. The Truma you give the Kohen. Truma means the first of the fruit, or not the first necessarily, but the part of the fruit that you donate to the Kohanim. Meiser, there's a Meiser Levi, there's Meiser Sheni, Meiser Rishon. Also, basically, how you allocate and how you what's the word I want to use? How you designate, how you designate parts of your harvest for different purposes. So there's Peya, there's Leket, there's Shikha, there's Dmai. He talks now, he's talking about Trumas HaMaisis. Shachelik HaSiri. Maisis is called Maisis because it's referring to the 10th. 1/10 of your harvest. Chelik HaChamishim. Or in some instances, it's 1/50th. Yufresh should be separated. V'yugdash LaHashem. And should be sanctified and designated for God. It's like the concept of Meiser in Tzedakah. So here we're talking about Meiser in the harvest, in the harvest of the field. But the same idea that you take 1/10 and you designate it, you give it to Hashem essentially. Ki LaHashem ha'aretz umloya, because Hashem owns the entire earth, and everything that fills this earth belongs to God. So what is one of the ways that you demonstrate that and you internalize that in your life is by giving from your produce, from your hard labor, from the fruits of your labor. You're giving part of that to godly purpose. So all this is the birur that the Chachmei Mishnah are teaching us of Torah Shebal Peh, how to align and how to direct and how to use the world toward godly end, toward the purpose of it all, which is what God wants. V'nevarer min achelke hatzemeach, And the process of doing is that we clarify and we separate and we refine from the parts of Tzemeach, meaning these parts that are being designated for the different mitzvahs that we're describing, Shebechol Haaretz. So all the Tzemeach that exists throughout the entire earth, the entire earth, and wherever it may grow. Kol ma shedibru chachamim behem. So everything the Chacham speak about these different species and these different details regarding the Minat Tzemeach, al pi ha-chochma shebedibur, according to the Chachma of the Dibur Torah sheb Baal Peh. Remember, Baal Peh, Peh, the spoken word, the Chacham are discussing it. And until it was written down, it was called Torah sheb Peh. Even now we call it Torah sheb Peh, even though now it's documented in Shas. But essentially, this is all part of Torah sheb Peh. Like we spoke before, Chachma shebedibur, shemipnei zeh nikla Torah sheb Peh. That's why it's called Torah sheb Peh, because it's the Chachma of the Dibur, the wisdom of which is in their what they speak and taught to each other and to their students and so on. Dafke. For this reason, it's called Torah sheb Peh Kiyadua. So all this, what the Chacham are speaking about, is the Birur of Minat Tzemeach. How to take your field, your harvest, all the fruit and vegetables that you produce, and what you do with them. That's what Torah sheb Peh is focused on. That's Seder Zroim. So he gave an example of how we see how Torah sheb Peh creates a birur in this world, which he called earlier a chidush gamur. This is a chidush because the world, the field on its own, without Torah, you'd harvest the field. If you're a benevolent person, you may give some charity, but if not, or you may not know what to do. So here's a field, so it remains neutral at best. I mean, it could be at worst, you could use it for bad purposes too. But comes Torah sheb Peh and says, here is how you transform your field into a field of Hashem, if you wish. Which means into what Hashem wants you to do with this field. Now, of course, this applies to all laws, also the laws of Shemitah and the laws of Yovel, all about how you treat and how you deal with the laws around agricultural laws, like we called it. That's one second. That is Seder Zroim. Any questions?
That's only in Eretz Israel. It seemed to imply it's the whole world. It's basically in Eretz Israel, the laws of agriculture.
Not all. There are laws also outside of Eretz Israel. And regardless, when you do it in Eretz Israel, you also elevate the Tzemeach from everywhere in the world. But correct, most of them are Eretz Israel, and he's talking about the time of the Beis Hamikdash and so on. Today, most laws apply still, but I would say, so I said 2 points. Number one is that elevates the Tzemeach from everywhere in the world. He does say, Kol ha'elam, it's correct. Shebechol ha'aretz, or you could say, Kol ha'aretz, the whole land. Does he mean only the land of Israel? Earlier he said, Kol minei bria shebechelik ha'tzemeach. So I would have to look up and see if any of these halachas apply outside of Eretz Yisrael. I believe that some do. I'm not positive. I'd have to look it up, but it's a good point, worthwhile researching. Okay, I'll get back to you on that. Trumas Hamaisis for sure is only in Eretz Yisrael. Lechet Shikha Peya probably also. Shemitah is in Eretz Yisrael for sure. Let me see the other ones he mentioned. Klayim, I think Klayim is not just in Eretz Yisrael. I think Klayim is also outside. Again, I'll look it up. I'll let you know. Okay. Now he goes to Seder Moyed. So he's going in the order of Zman Nokat. Zroim, the same as Seder Moyed. And the same with the order of Moyed. Moyed means designated time. The Moyadim, the holidays. So Moyed includes Masechta Shabbos, Masechta Pesachim, Masechta Yuma, Shkolim, and everything around the Yom Tov. Masechta, what other Masechtas? These Masechtas, there are more. Chagigas, I believe, in Moyed. And Erevin, so Chem Seder Moyed, Medaber, What is Seder Moed doing? He talked now about the agricultural laws. Seder Moed talks about the laws around time, how you sanctify time. And different times have different ways you sanctify it, and what the laws are, how to turn the laws, what you have to do on Shabbos, what you do on Pesach. And the same with other, Masechta Sukkah, of course, didn't mention. Masechta Rosh Hashanah. These are all Masechtas in Moed. So he says, Medaber b'Kedusha, the Chochma Bina, Keshabbos. Okay, let me just explain Kedusha of Chochma Bina. When you say Yom Tovim and Shabbos Yom Tovim, we say they're sanctified days. So just like we talked before about sanctifying agricultural, that the vegetation, but there, besides for Truma and Meiser in the Beis Hamikdash, you don't always call it Kedush, Kedusha, you call it aligning it toward Hashem. When it comes to Shabbos, you have Shabbos Kedush, the Kacha V'Kaima. That the seventh day, we say, V'Yikadosh, God sanctified this day. And we, therefore, have to also sanctify it through our behavior. What you're supposed to do, what you're not allowed to do. When it comes to Yom Tovim, we say, Mekadosh Yisrael V'Azmanim. Iyu Kachinu. Who's Mekadosh Yom Tov? So there's more focus on us being Mekadosh it. Because we designate when the new moon would be, with the new moon, which is the new month, and based on that, determines the day of the holiday. But regardless, both of them are a level of Kedush. So he's saying, Moedim are talking about the Kedush of Chochma Bina. Chochma Bina is where the Chochma is called Kedush Milibegarmei, and Bina is sometimes called Kodesh, but regardless, both of them together are the level of Kedusha. So when we say we're Mekadesh something, we're elevating them, we're drawing down from Chochma Bina, and that's the Kedusha of Shabbos and Yom Tovim. Chochma is sometimes Shabbos, and Bina associates with Yom Tov. Doesn't go into details here. He just says Medaber b'Kedush, the Chochma Bina, Shabbos, like Shabbos, B'dal Reshuyas. So what do you learn in Masechta Shabbos? You talk about the 4 different Reshuyas, 4 different domains. Shusayachid, Shusarabim, a Carmelis, and so on. So it talks about the different domains and the laws of Shabbos, of which domain you're not allowed to carry from Shusayachid to Shusarabim. And in general, each one has their particular laws, especially in the Shabbos, on the day of Shabbos. The Lamates Melachos. And it talks about the 39 types of work that are not allowed on Shabbos. And there's details about that. So basically, the Seder Moed, and now he's using Masechta Shabbos as an example, is talking about the details of that particular day, of how you sanctify it. And same thing for Yom Tov. And also talks about the laws of Yom Tov. Again, he's not going into detail, but it could be the laws of Rosh Hashanah, the laws of Yom Kippur, the laws of Sukkah, and so on. She doesn't speak details, but this same idea, the Birur. So what are the Chachamim in the Chachmei Mishnah and the Talmud doing? They're clarifying, and they're looking into the details of this particular period in time to tell us how you use that day to sanctify it toward God. So that's a Birur of a Klippas Neged. In other words, without the halachas of Teresh V'Apeh, we wouldn't know how to honor Shabbos. We wouldn't know how to celebrate a Yom Tov. In the parentheses, the Rebbe, Mittler Rebbe, qualifies, because there's a question asked, how about Masechta Bereishis? Masechta Bereishis, is in Zroim, the first Masechta of the whole Shas. So some ask the question, why is it in Zroim? The blessings that we make, whether it's on foods or other blessings, is not necessarily connected only to food and things that grow in a field. So he's referring to Bereishis, al minei hatzmicha shayach l'seder Zroim. So he's answering, which some of the commentaries explain, because most of the brachas are connected to things that grow. And that's why it's shaykh to say Dezroim B'tam Anal, for the reason mentioned above, because brachas is all part, as like I mentioned before, all part of what blessing you make on particular foods. The fact that there are other blessings, Birchas Hanenin, that are Masechta Brachas, for example, the beginning of Masechta Brachas doesn't talk about bracha on food. It talks about Shema. When do you start saying Shema? In the evening. But the commentaries explain, but the rave, most of the blessings are around connected to food. So that's why they put Masechta Brachas in Zroim. Why he puts it right here, I'm not sure. Why he should seemingly this parentheses, which ends at the end of the word betamanal, seemingly should have gone before Masechta Moed and after Masechta Zroim. But for some reason the Mittler Rebbe puts it here, so he qualifies that brachas. But it's the same idea, but it applies to Seder Zroim. Next Seder. Seder Nezikin. Zman Nokat, remember Zroim Moed, now Nezikin. This is the third section in Shas, and it's Nezikin means damages. This is all the laws of damages. Baba Mitzia, Baba Kama, Baba Mitzia, Baba Basra. The laws of damages. Damages, whether two people living near each other and they're partners, or two people like in the Baba Mitzia, Shnaim, two people. It's all the laws about interaction. And you can say also the laws of Nezikin, damages, as well as litigation and interaction between an owner and a worker, between partners, between neighbors. So that's Nezikin. Overall, it goes into the category of Nezikin damages. A lot of the laws in Nezikin come from Parsha Mishpatim, actually. So if your Sher Shanogach Sapora, your ox, your bull gored someone else's cow, these are all part of the laws of Nezikin. So what does Nezikin talk about? So he says, B'dinei Mominus. Nezikin is all about Dinei Mominus, financial laws, the financial obligations we have to each other. Shebechol prat u prat, and it goes into every detail again, birur. That's why he's using the words every detail, every party, every type of argument, every type of disagreement, every type of damage is possible. Anywhere where there's a financial disagreement or a financial issue, well, it's not just disagreements, contracts, upholding contracts, the obligations that people have to each other. It's all dinei mominus. So b'chol prat to prat shemedabrim b'daled ovis nezikin. So it begins right away in Baba Kama, the four primary types of damages, which we talk about ovis nezikin, hasher. What's the fourth ovis nezikin? I'm losing it right now. Hever and Mavir, and the fourth one, Shed Shein. Yeah. So there's the different four ways that your ox can gore someone, or a fire burns, or a person causes a damage. So these div dal lovas and zik, which have many tuldas, they have many subsets. So he said these details, hakol hu b'chinas habirur, all of this is the clarity. V'halah, chapter next page, 413. The chol b'chinas chelek hachai. Now we're talking about the different levels of animals, because it talks a lot about the animals, the animal that you own that damages a property or causes other problems. So he's saying, so now before Zeroyim was dedicated to Tzemeach. Moyed, he didn't really say. Moyed seems to be more. Well, we'll try to figure that out afterwards. But now he's speaking about Kol B'chinas Achai, the Sher, the Chamer, the Klippas Nega, an ox or bull, and a Chamer, a donkey, that are all from Klippas Nega. On their own, they're Klippas Nega, meaning they're not Kedusha, but you want to make sure that you use them in the right way. And if they do anything wrong, you want to make sure that you compensate and you appropriately deal with it. So you see from here that Seder Nezikin is the laws, the birur of Torah Sheba'al Peh in the area of the world of Chai. Now it's obviously not just limited to Chai, because like I said, one of the obvious Nezikin is a human. But a big part of it is definitely the laws of what the Sherech Hamer, which of course includes, just as an example, that Kisira Chamer Sanecha, when you see the donkey of your enemy, the famous Baal Shem Tov's Torah, and he's burdened by weight, you shouldn't ignore it. You should help him. So again, it's also compassion to animals and so on. That's three. Now he's going to Seder Kachim, the next three. That says Man Nokat, So here it's a different order because Zman would be the next one should be Noshim, then Kochim Taris. So he goes now to say the Kochim. I was going with the order of Nezem Cotton. Okay. Say the Kochim. What does Kochim speak about? Kochim refers to all the things we sanctify, like carbonus, or property, or anything that goes into the area of Hegdish, Kochim. So Medabe be'karbonus behemoths v'tzayin, it talks about the offerings of various animals and sheep and cattle. Well, it doesn't say bucket, tzayin, sheep. Which is, again, chai. Gam b'menachis, it also talks about the korban mincha. There's a Masechta Menachos. The korban mincha came from tzemeach. It was selus. It was flour and oil. Tzemeach. So this whole Masech, this whole Seder Kochim talks about what is the rate to bring an offering and what's the appropriate way to bring the offering. Mashiyala al gaba mizbeach, referring to all these offerings, whether it's animal offerings or it's vegetation offerings, like menachos, what you can elevate on the altar in the Beis Hamikdash. Shu chelik hatev, not every carbon, not every animal, and not everything, every species is appropriate to bring as an offering. And even when you bring it as an offering, how you prepare it, the right kavonis, all the intentions. So this is all about what to elevate on the Mizbeach LaHashem needs to be, you have to have birur. Shu chelik hatev, hanifche v'nivrer, kol harad klipas nega sheyuchal ales. So the Torah Shabbat Peh comes to teach us in Seder Kochim how to extract the good and the chosen and that which is refined from all the ra, from the negative of klipas nega, that which you're capable of elevating on a mizbeach. So there's certain animals, either due to the fact that they're tamei, impure, or because they've been blemished, and they have a mum, they have a blemish, so they're not fitting to bring on the mizbeach. So this again is a birur of finding the good within the world of chai and semeach, and what is befitting and appropriate to bring on the altar. So this is Kochim. The next two is going to be Taris and then Noshim. Ukamay came bedine tuma v'tara. Shebeseda Taris. So Seder Taris, like the name implies, Taris means purifications. This Seder, this order talks about everything that's pure and impure. So there, the dinim of Tumah and Tara, the laws of the purity and impurity, the toxic and the pure. Lohetzi toyer mitame. This Seder, this part of Torah Shabbat Peh comes to teach us how to draw the pure from the impure. V'hatame, tame yikar. And what to designate, which is impure, as impure. So it's two things. It's to find that which is pure and extract it, and to designate and make sure that that which is tummy is designated as such. Another birur, the birur of Tumah and Tara. And finally, Seder Noshim. And Seder Noshim, he says, is talking B'chelek HaMedaber. Now we're talking about human beings. Seder Noshim is all the laws. Noshim means women, but it means all the laws connected to marriage and to basically women and men. But it's about Kedushin, Subis, Gittin, Yevomis. So all this is Seder Noshim. So we're talking Chelek HaMedaber. So Zeroim and a little part of Kochim is Semeach. Nezikin, he said, is primarily Chai. And now Noshim is B'chelek HaMedaber. And what is the birur that we're doing here? Because here you also have human beings, whether it's, let's say, the laws of marriage. So how you marry, the appropriate way to marry, the appropriate way for a husband and wife to be together, and all the other details around that. It's a birur. What is the birur? B'chin is ban de nega. I'm not sure if he's referring now to dafka noshim, or he's going back to all the 6 darim. This is not clear to me. Let me just read quickly here. You could say both ways. He just says say the noshe chelik hamadaber, so hypothetically it could be as a period, supposed to be a period here, and now he covered all 6, and then he's going back and saying b'chinas ban denega, that all of them are involved in the ban, like we learned before. Ban is the gematria behema, but he's not talking here dafka behema. He's talking about in general the elikus that's concealed in the behema of klipas nega. And the human being comes to elevate it to Shem Ma. Remember, we learned earlier that Shem Ma is Mavara Shem Ban. But I'm not sure why he's saying it right here. Is he referring to, for example, Masechta Seita? So it says in some places that Seita is from the word in Adam Evravel Elim Keinuchens Bereich Shtus, because it refers to the insanity or the ruach shtus, which connected to a person behaving like an animal. So I don't think he's referring to that. I'm just thinking out loud. So that's why this bechinas ban denega is not clear to me exactly. But in broad terms, you could say he's referring to the general birur of ban through ma, which is really the whole aveda of the birur of Torah Shebal Peh. From the parentheses that comes afterwards, it appears that's what he's doing now. He's coming and summing up everything we just learned. So to sum up what we just learned right now, we talked about how the whole Torah Shebal Peh comes to do birur, and in Demim Sameach Chaim Medaber, and then the Mittler Rebbe broke it down. He actually went through each of the 6 sections, each of the 6 parts of Torah Shebal Peh, from Zrayim, Moyad, Nizikin, Kochim, Taris, and Noshim. Okay. So before I continue, are there any questions? So there's going to be 2 parentheses I see here, and they may be a little not so clear how they work. Okay. No questions. Okay. So let's continue. So he says like this. Shekol zeh, all is that we just discussed, nikra b'chinas birur hapselis. This is called the separating, or sometimes we use the word clarifying or refining. They're all fitting words. But technically, mevarer, birur, means to separate. On Shabbos, you're not allowed to separate things, like the food from the... So, the Veda of birurim is the birur hapselis. So like we spoke the examples he gave before, silver. When you cleanse and refine silver, what you're doing is removing the sediment and trying to create a pure version of it. The same thing is when you peel vegetables, fruits and vegetables. You're removing the waste, you're removing the peels or the pits or whatever else is not really edible. So that birur in physical terms, in ruchnius, is the same idea. We come into a physical world and we remove and separate the good from the part that can be nourishing and nurturing and nutrients from the dross. In this case, the good stuff that can be used for Kedusha, for a mitzvah, and you discard the pselis. So it's birur pselis. So all that we're talking about is the birur pselis, which is essentially what Torah Shebal Peh does. It clarifies what is right and what is wrong, what should be done and what should be avoided, what should be discarded. Bizdachus ha'achrurius, in the refinement of the achrurius comes from like the dust, the sediment, the coarse sediment min hachemer that's there in the coarse matter. Shaydezeh yiu zach v'noki. Through that it will become pure and clean. V'dai l'mev. So this is the process. So just as we, as I said, remove the waste or remove the pits or the peel and the unedible in order to eat the healthy food, the same thing in Ruchnius, when we go into the material world. So the material world, let's say you're making money. Money can create greed, can create jealousy, can create certain arrogance. But when you use the money properly, you give the proper amount of tzedakah, and you use the money for good purpose to educate your children for Shabbos and Yontif and so on. So you're taking a physical object called money and you turned it into, you remove the waste, the way it could be used in a bad way, and you're extracting the good of it. Same thing when the Jewish people gave donations to the Mishkan, the gold, silver, and copper. So they're taking the physical matter, which on its own has in it a certain element potential for crassness or for selfishness, and is directed toward Kedusha. Same thing what we just spoke in all the different areas of the agricultural laws, and the same thing with Moed and Nezikin, and with Tuma and Tahara, Kochim. So it's all about what he's saying here, the Birur, again, the Birur Apselis, by refining the Achrurius, the sediment from the chaymer, from the raw matter, raw material, in order to create that it should be zach v'noki. So another example would be when you're choosing materials to build a house or to decorate your house. So you'll go and you'll look at different materials. Some material you'll see is not fitting. Some of it you're going to try to pick the best, the most refined, and so on. Sometimes you'll need someone to polish or prepare it. Like you could take wood. The wood maybe potentially can really be used in a good way, but you need someone to prepare the wood, to prime it. So we take the material world and we turn it into ornaments or into furniture or into upholstery or into other things to decorate and beautify our homes. That's a process of refining something from the crass or the coarse and making it more refined. This is a process of in general, of the process of refining anything in this world. So in Kedusha, this is what Torah Shabbat Peh does. It refines things. It refines the world from a crass, coarse situation, which can also be used sometimes in a bad way. It refines it all to make it a proper, beautiful home for God. A keli for Elikus. That's essentially what he's saying here. Any questions? Now, the next parentheses, frankly, seems to belong earlier. Remember, he spoke before about Kedusha and Tahara. Spoke first about Tumah v'Tahara, Kochim, and then he spoke about Tumah v'Tahara. This parentheses addresses the difference between Kedusha and Tahara. So I'm wondering, like, why is it coming here? Well, you could make the case that first he summed up the whole picture, and then he's adding another point about Kedusha and Tahara. Let's read the parentheses and let's see what he says. Like it says elsewhere, by hefresh ben Kedusha l'Tahara. So we know there's two expressions. We say actually Tahara mevil de Kedusha. Tahara is purifying, Kedusha is sanctifying. Now, ostensibly, it sounds like they're synonymous, but they're not. Like, for example, when you go into a mikveh, you don't say you're Mekadesh, you're Metaher. Metaher, all the Taharas, was a Tahara from Tumas Mes, or any Tumah. Mekadesh is when you take a carbon, you take an animal, you say, I'm designating it, I'm sanctifying it. You're Mekadesh when you are Mekadesh Isha, you sanctify in marriage. Kiddush is used also when you're dealing with taking an animal and making it hegdish, to say, I'm donating this to the Beis HaMikdash. That's used when you use the word Kedusha. So it says elsewhere, the difference between Kedusha and Tahara, and we'll soon try to see why he's bringing this. The Kedusha be'etzem haviyosem etchila. The Kedusha is something that is from its inception, meaning from its very existence, it was Kaddish. Things that are Kaddish, for example, Shabbos, Kaddish. You don't have to sanctify Shabbos. Shabbos is Kaddish, Etzem Aviyus, as it means from its very core existence, its very being, mitchila, from it initially. Shenikra bohir, be'etzem, it's called a core fundamental bright light, meaning it is, that's its state. Ka'er hameir, be'kechav hameir, like a shining light and like a shining star. Uke'evan hashayam, or like a luminous stone. Shayam, there are different opinions what Shayam is. I think Shayam in this case is, what is he called? What is how they translate Shayam? Not sapphire, that's sapphire. Maybe jasmine, I'm not sure. Evan Hashem. But regardless, it's a luminous stone. So these are objects. A shining star is not, you're not causing it to have light. It itself is essentially a bright, like a sun. It's a bright luminary. So that is Kedusha. Now there's a parenthesis here, but it doesn't make sense, the parentheses, because he has to explain what's Tahara. So I would say this parenthesis, I see below, let me see a second. No, maybe the parentheses have to be taken out altogether. I see below, in two of the manuscripts, there's no parentheses at all. Okay. And what about Tahara? If that's Kedusha, Kedusha is something fundamentally holy. Tahara hu lahitzi atev gamin hara. Tahara is referring to purifying something, meaning it's not pure on its own. It's to draw out the good from the bad, from the negative. L'zachech hagashmis ke'even yashpa. To refine the gashmis. This is not like a naturally luminous stone. This is when you polish something. And a yashpa is considered to be a stone. So there's two types of stones. There's stones that just naturally are luminous. And there's stones that are not luminous on their own. But if you do something to it, you treat it properly, in the proper way, you can turn them into something that shines. That's the difference between Shem and Yashpa. I need to look up the exact translations of Shem and Yashpa, but that is sometimes when we say Samti Kotkid, it's Shem v'Yashpa. These are two stones that were also in the breastplate, in the Choshen, in the Avnei Miluyim, the Urim v'Tumim of the Kohen Gadol. But I will look up what's the difference between these two stones in English. I'm not sure what they are. But for all practical purposes, what he's saying is one shines on its own, and one requires you to do a refinement to make it shine. So it seems to me that what he's trying to say is that the birur we're talking about has two elements. One birur is just to identify what is Kaddish. Another birur is actually to refine something and make it into. That's what it looks like he's adding here in this picture. And now he says, "Hu er yashar v'er chezer." These two methods of Kedusha and Tahara is the difference in er yashar and er chezer, which before we talked about was the written Torah and the oral Torah. Er yashar is obviously the er that is like shayham, something that is shining a light on its own. Er chezer is something that you transform through birur and you turn it into a light. This is Er Yoshev Echezer. The base mine Esi is the Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebal Peh. The two types of letters, the letters of Torah Shebiksav, like we learned before, every letter is holy and precise. The letters of Torah Shebal Peh, though there's a certain precision, but it's not quite the same, because it's actually the words of the Baal Peh that were said by the Chachamim. So that the ideas are precise. But the letters are not quite as the letters in the Torah Shebiksav, because it's more letters of explanation. Shanim Shala Mashpia Makabel. These two types of letters are compared to Mashpia, Torah Shebiksav, Er Yosher, and Torah Shebal Peh, Makabel. Bechinas Mad Uman, Mayin Tchurin, which means the waters of the Mashpia of the male waters, which is mamshachim from the above, from top down. Oman mayin nukvim, the feminine waters, which is first to asusa the tata from the bottom up, like Teda Shabbat. The mad, who atzmi is the vlad. The mad, meaning the seed that comes from the male, is the very core. The atzmi is the bones are made, and bones are called atzmis, like the core, because they're like the main skeleton of the child. Va'aman, and the feminine, the egg, the feminine contribution, migadelis be'er ubasar v'gidim ve'evarim. That forms the skin, the flesh, the nerves, and the limbs. This is from the Gemara. I don't see that Seichen here, but okay. So since I'm reading, let me just read till the end just to get the whole thing. This is like the difference between stones and bricks. An Evan is created by God, stones that are naturally created in this world. A brick is made by a worker. You take straw and you combine it with different materials and you make bricks out of it. Shenasim ha'ofar b'kivshan. Levanim are made from earth, from earthly matter, b'kivshan in an oven that hardens it. So there again, you see the difference between like something that's naturally that way and something that's produced, that's refined. The tachas ragel of kamaisa livnus asapir, where it says elsewhere in Parsha Mishpatim, or is this the end of Yisrael rather, that after Matan Torah, they saw God, they had a vision of the God, and beneath his legs was kamaisa livnus asapir. Livnus asapir is like white sapphire. So in the Maimer that talks about that, discusses these two types of yasher, chezer, one that's naturally that way, and the other that is created, man-made, so to speak. Like it says, for them, the levena, the bricks were like stone. The letters of the written Torah are called stones. Because that's a atzmi on its own. It's a atzmi. Torah shebiksav. The Ace is the Torah shebalpeh, and the letters of the oral Torah, kilevena. They're compared to a brick that's made by man. Shemedabrim bebirur habruyim datzach. Shemedvarim. Kilevena shemedabrim or medvarim.
Excuse me.
Sure. Kilevena shemedabrim or medvarim bebirur habruyim datzach. Like we said before with Torah shebalpeh, that it's not coming from the top down, from above, like the Kedusha, the holiness of Torah Shebiksav. But here we're talking about a birur that you're clarifying and you're refining from the bruim, the creations of Daimim Tzemeach Chai, and turning that into something that is divine.
Excuse me?
That's like a kalevena, that is like a brick. So bottom line is, based on what we just read, it's very clear to me that after he finished with the 6 orders of the of Shas, then he went and is now really talking. The difference between Kedusha and Tahara is not referring to Shas, I don't think. He's talking back to a difference between Torah, the written Torah and the oral Torah. That's what this end is. So after explaining the oral Torah, he goes back and explains the differences, like the stones and the levanim, like Shem and Yashpa, like Kedusha and Tahara. That's the difference between the written Torah and the oral Torah. I'll obviously explain this more in the next class because it's already late, but I will stop here at the end of the paragraph on page 413. And I'll take any quick questions if anybody has any questions. And we'll go over this tomorrow again in more detail.
Can we look at Livnas Hasapir as a combination between man-made and God-made? Since
I would have
Levena
to look up. He says it's discussed elsewhere. I would have to look up what it says in that discourse, which if you look in the footnote, they tell us where to look. So I would have to look it up. I don't want to speculate.
I mean, it's right there for me.
I
don't know what that
He
means,
says-
though. That
It's discussed elsewhere. So I would look it up. If you feel you can derive it from here, Fine, I don't see there's enough here for me to be able to answer that question.
No, all I'm saying is that the combination is Livnas is, like you said, Livena, and Sapir is Sapphire, which is not.
I don't know if that's the combination or there's a different interpretation. I would need to look up. And if you want, you can look it up yourself. He gives here the footnotes for it.
I don't think I'm at that level.
Okay, I'll look it up and I'll let you know what I find.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions? So we'll stop here at the end of the paragraph on page 413.